Here we are. It's July 16th, 1870. France and Prussia are at war, and that's Prussia with a P. It was on July 19th of 1870 that hostilities begin. This is what I consider to be the first shots fired in a war that would end with the horrible human disaster that we call World War II, or, as I refer to it, the beginning of the 95 Years' War. During this war, the Prussian armies were able to mobilize much quicker than the French armies were, and move far more troops to the front using railroads. Prussians had learned this from the American Civil War that ended 5 years earlier. They had sent observers to the U.S. to see what they could learn about modern warfare. Because Prussia was attacked by a foreign power, France, all the German provinces joined together as one against a common enemy. This was a treaty that had been agreed upon by the French provinces at the end of the Austro-Prussian War that I covered in my previous video. This uniting of Germany is just what the French had wanted to prevent. This war happens quickly. By September of 1870, 2 months, the French army, led by this guy, Marshal Bazaine, was stopped by the Prussians at the Battle of Gravelotte. Bazaine and his army then retreated to Metz, France. The French army there were immediately surrounded by 140,000 Prussians, and so began the siege of Metz. There were a few attempts by the French army at a breakout, but they were each stopped by the Prussian armies. In response, Napoleon III himself formed the new French army of Chalon. He and his army began moving to relieve the siege of Metz, where Bazaine's French army was trapped. The Prussians were aware of this move by Napoleon, and on September 1st of 1870, they met Napoleon's army at Sedan. It was there, at the Battle of Sedan in eastern France, that the French army was defeated, and Napoleon III himself surrendered his army and was captured on the 2nd of September. The French were all but defeated, and the path to Paris, the French capital, was clear of French troops. Even though the Emperor of France and the French armies were captured, the French in Paris were not willing to give up that easy. After an uprising by the French people, they formed the Government of National Defense, or the Third Republic. Otto von Bismarck wanted to end the war right then, but the French Government of National Defense renewed the declaration of war. The German army then began the siege of Paris. The war went on throughout France until about January of 1871. It was the French provincial armies that had fought on. Then, on January 18th of 1871, the German Empire officially became into existence. With the possibility of starvation in Paris due to the siege and the hopeless nature of resisting, on January 28th of 1871, the Armistice of Versailles signed between the German Empire and the Government of National Defense, which effectively ended hostilities. Does Versailles ring a bell in the future? Anyway, it took until February 5th for all the provincial armies to surrender. Then, on May 5th of 1871, the Treaty of Frankfurt that ended the war was signed. And this is very important, people. The highlights of this treaty, the Treaty of Frankfurt, play a direct role in the continuation of this war. Here is a time where what we know now, this peace treaty, was more of a ceasefire than an end to a war. History will repeat itself in the future. The treaty established a frontier between the French Third Republic and the German Empire, and involved giving up 1,694 villages and cities under French control to Germany in, anyone? The provinces of Alsace and Lorraine. The German government gave residents of the Alsace-Lorraine region until October 1st of 1872 to decide between keeping their French nationality and emigrating, or remaining in the region and becoming German citizens. It required also the payment of war reparations by France of 5 billion francs, due within 5 years. It recognized the acceptance of Wilhelm I of Prussia as German emperor. It also required military occupation of parts of France, including Paris, until the war reparations were paid. The French paid them quickly because they wanted the Germans out. The treaty also established the terms for the following: the use of navigable waterways in connection to Alsace and Lorraine, trade between the two countries, and the return of prisoners of war. This defeat gave birth to revangism, or literally revengism, in France. Revenge towards Germany is taught in school and becomes a part of French culture. Be sure to hold on to your hate, people. Sounds like a lot of groups in the world today. Shall history be repeated? There was a literal national desire for another war with Germany to reclaim Alsace-Lorraine. This will show itself a little bit later on in the 20th century when it begins. Maybe the French just saw, as I have mentioned, the Treaty of Frankfurt as a ceasefire. Because it's interesting, the total deaths during the Franco-Prussian War was 167,177 people. These are the first to die, and I'll keep a running death toll up here for you. In my next video, we'll be going to the other side of the world in a conflict between the United States and Spain known as the Spanish-American War. It is very relevant and connected in the end. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you can be notified when my next video comes out. Hopefully we'll have a link to my previous video right up over here. And I do appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next week. This is World War II with Mike W., the history of the 95 Years' War.